Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of The Democratic View. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and I'm the hostess, gratefully, of this show. And we have a very important man, maybe the most important man in the whole building, with us today. But before we start, I just want to remind everybody that on Sunday, 9/21, that's September the 21st, at 11:30 a.m. in Columbus Circle, there's going to be the largest climate march in history. And more than 1,000 organizations, including the Sierra Club, the World Wildlife Fund, Earth Day Network, National Wildlife Federation, and many others will be on hand. And I'm hoping that you'll go. I know I'm going to try to go myself, even though it's a heck of a trip. But what we are going to do now is we're going to talk to the man who runs this station, and very handily, I might add, and his name is Seth Redlus.
Thanks, Phyllis. It's good to be on your show. I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. So
yeah, I know, I'm sure. But you know, I'm going to tell you why I asked you. Because you availed this studio to the town board. Of course, the town board helps to facilitate this studio. And there were, at this airport meeting on September the 27th, I believe, almost 400 people. Now, I got to tell you, I was here. I couldn't find a seat. Every place was filled to capacity. And I knocked on the door of the control room, and you said, sure, come on in. And I watched you. And I could not believe your technical skill. You had 3 operators at the control board, Mike, Paul, and Lena, and you were constantly telling them what to do as each person spoke, and so that we would be able to have a really well-produced show. How did you learn to do that is what I want to know. I was amazed.
Well, I thank you for the credit, but actually it really is the staff. We have an amazing staff who works really hard and cares about the work that they do and wants to see the programming look the way that I know that you want it to look, Phyllis. So
yes,
you know, they definitely take the credit for that. I think what I do is I exert influence. I'm not necessarily telling them what to do. They know how to mix sound and how to direct shows and how to get the right camera angles. But I like to think that I have sort of standards in my own head of what I want to see and the level that I want to see it at. And so I try to communicate that as best as I can to the staff and crew so that they're able to execute that. When you want to ask about how I learned it.
Yes, I do. That's what I want to know.
You know, it's interesting. The bulk of it I learned right here in this building when I was here in sort of 8th grade as a volunteer. And I
Were you really?
Yeah, I one of the few things that my brother ever did for me where he wasn't, you know, trying to get something out of me on the back end. He had suggested that I come down here one summer and sort of check it out and see what it was about. My parents live about a half a mile from here. And I rode my bike down with my then best friend. And in the first day we were here, we were cable casting, we were on a show. The staff welcomed us with open arms and taught us what they knew. And I spent about 5 years here up until I graduated high school before I went off to college and sort of pursued my professional career. And in that 5 years, I learned really those core competencies that you need to operate this facility.
Well, see, now I didn't know that about you. You are born and raised here in
Waynescott.
I know you're in Waynescott because I was at the voting booth one time, and
Exactly. So I went to the Waynescott school, and I'm what, you know, some people know Waynescott people as dumplings. I don't know where that comes from, but yes, I guess I'm technically a Waynescott dumpling. Born and raised.
And went to East Hampton High School.
Went to East Hampton
and
High School.
College?
College, I went to a small school in West Palm Beach, and
really,
I was in a rush to get out of there real fast. So
Aha. And what was your major?
my major was, I have an associate's in advertising, and I have a bachelor's in marketing and business management.
Aha.
And then I worked for a couple years professionally in New York, and then I went to Babson, which is in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and got my MBA.
Aha. So it's business that you...
Oh, I'm a business major.
Oh, really? So it's not anything like photography or anything like
No.
that, like you would get at
No.
SUNY Purchase or something like
My,
that?
my interest largely started here. I was very fortunate to do an internship at an advertising agency in New York City. Spent a summer in high school doing that. I worked for Beach Radio. I was on the air for them for close to 10 years as a part-timer. So I got a lot of radio experience there. I got my television experience here. My big career in New York was I worked for the Wall Street Journal, so I did newspaper with them, and came back here when I had the opportunity.
So if you really have been here since 8th grade, which I know you
Big
were
break in the middle, but yeah.
13, 14 years old, that's really an amazing thing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how LTV got started? I would love to know that.
So there were a group of individuals who started LTV really unofficially in the very early 80s, probably about 81, 82. And it was largely operated at that point by a man named Fraser Doherty, who most people in this community know because of his impact of what he created in this facility. And that group of people worked together because they found out that there was this thing called public access television where anybody could have or could leverage a channel on cable. And cable was really just sort of starting out at the time. I mean, it was still very young and very sort of undeveloped and sort of the Wild West in the world of communications. I'm sure you remember from back then, everybody was over the air, and if you had the big antenna on top of your house, and if you got a couple of channels, you were lucky, unless you lived in a big city like New York and you got all the channels. But then this thing called cable came into your house, and now you could have 20 channels,
Right.
which was massive.
It wasn't just 2, 4, and 7.
Yeah, exactly.
And 13.
And so that they saw that opportunity. And the group worked on it for a couple of years, and they decided to formalize it in 1984 by creating Local TV Inc., which is LTV.
Did they have to go through the FCC, the Federal Communications?
No, the FCC doesn't really get involved. The FCC creates a provision. What happens is when a municipality identifies that it does want this station of its own, the cable operator is required by law to create that so it can happen.
Really?
Yes.
Who was the supervisor who decided that?
That's a good question. I want to say it was Judith Hope back in the day, because I know that she was actually the first supervisor that allowed meetings to be taped and allowed Fraser and the team to come in, and was so accommodating at the time that she would actually stop the meeting every 20 minutes so they could change tapes, because that's as long as the tapes would go, is 20 minutes.
Right, in those days, yes, indeed.
So she was accommodating enough. I mean, can you imagine some of these marathon meetings having to stop every 20 minutes so somebody can eject and put
I
one
can't
in?
imagine anybody putting up with that.
Exactly. So she was, I think, very progressive as a supervisor by allowing that to happen. And then in short order after her, I don't remember if there's somebody in the middle, but I know Tony Bullock was a huge supporter of the organization and really helped foster its growth from a governmental standpoint.
And how did the building get to be?
So
Nice building.
it's a very nice building. We are incredibly fortunate, and it's something that sets us apart from a lot of public access stations. Fraser was married to a wonderful woman by the name of Frances Ann Doherty, who was really just a major, major supporter of the station. And so she raised, or actually donated really, the vast majority of funds that was used to build the building. So we have something very unique here. I mean, we look at East Hampton as being, this small community, which is obviously in the summer incredibly affluent, and during the middle of the year is just sort of an average community. But here we have this fantastic facility with a 10,000 square foot footprint that wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that private support that came in.
That's an amazing story, and this is the first time I'm really hearing. I mean, I knew about Fraser Doherty because I think everybody sort of learns a little bit about that, but I didn't know all of the other stuff that went along.
It was his vision that created this facility, and it was part of a larger vision which included the building next door and what he called the media center. And he really did want a place where all of the media on the East End could sort of call home. So that would be television and radio, and I think that he even wanted print to be involved in that, and that was sort of the larger vision. And this is the piece that got built, that struggled for many years and worked very hard to stay above water, and finally has gotten to a point where it's hit its stride. And this is actually 30 years. We're not overly celebrating that, but it is 30 years that LTV has been around, and it's taken every bit of that 30 years to get to where we are today.
That's great. That's really a wonderful story. But you also have a board, and I know Robert Strata, as in Fellini Strata, which I love to quote him on that, is the head of the board. And exactly how many members are there in the board, and what do they do?
The board does fluctuate. I believe the articles of incorporation allow for 15 seats, and sometimes you have 15, and sometimes you have 10, and people, it's an ebb and flow as people are able to give their time. A lot of boards in the nonprofit world, I'm not sure how familiar you are with that, are known as sometimes work boards or money boards, or sometimes there's a money board and then a work board, and what that means is people who either put up a large amount of money or people who put in a lot of effort. And we have a work board. We have a board where people come in and they work on ideas and concepts, and then they take those out and they see what they can flush out in the community and try to make things happen. So the board has worked a lot on outreach projects where they identify a specific group of people that they'd really like to talk with, or see if they can get that group of people to leverage the station in one way or another. And then we work on strategies to try to make that happen.
And do they have a certain time limit for their term, or do they just work until they
there is a time limit, and you'll have to forgive me for not knowing the exact rules, but they do serve a time limit, and they can renew if there is an open position and if the rest of the board re-elects them back on. And after, I believe it is 2 terms, they're actually forced off for a year until they're allowed to come back again.
And the contributing member or the basis of your operation is the town of East Hampton.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The money for LTV comes through what's known as the cable franchise fee. So you as a subscriber to Cablevision, and anybody who's watching this program, we receive, through the town receives technically 5% of your cable bill. And you have to realize that doesn't include internet, and it doesn't include phone, it doesn't include a lot of things.
Just the cable part of the bill.
But that cable piece includes your cable TV. It includes a kickback of every dime you spend on Home Shopping Network and QVC. It includes service calls. It includes a pay-per-view, any of those things that come into the town. The town receives a check of 5% of those funds, and then the town uses that money to help fund this operation. So cable subscribers who are benefiting from the station are the ones who are supporting it.
I'm so happy to learn all this. There's nothing I knew. And now I won't feel so bad if I go and can spend more money on my cable for stuff.
There you go, exactly, yeah.
And your liaison to the board is Peter Van Scoyoc?
Peter Van Scoyoc, and it's been really fantastic having Peter. In the years past, LTV has been fortunate to have a number of town board members who have been liaisons, and some are a little more involved than others, and it becomes difficult as an organization to really have a strong relationship with the town if that liaison isn't there, isn't aware of what's going on, and isn't putting in the time. We're very fortunate that Peter attends our board meetings, and he's a part of discussions, and he communicates what the thoughts of people in the town are. So it's been really great having him as our ex officio liaison board member.
Yes, well, I know Peter quite well, and I'm sure that he does a good job. I also noticed, of course, because I have programmed my television set so that when I turn it on, I'm on 20.
I like that. That's a very nice thing.
You know what? I absolutely love it. I have caught shows that, I mean, sometimes I can't move in my bedroom. I'm so busy watching Seal Downs talk about the different weeds, or Del Cullum talking about, some of the species that live out here. It's an amazing variety and an amazing eclectic bit of knowledge that one gets from watching the Channel 20, which is what we're going to be on, but also there's Channel 22,
Yes.
which I also love. I mean, I cannot tell you, well, it's right up my alley when they start talking about, the Roman Empire and things like that. I really do love their wonderful knowledge. And as Joe Giannini was talking about, you have Democracy Now! On the morning, and then in the evening, there's also another wonderful news show that you have on. And it really is, I can't stand commercials. I will not listen to a commercial. I don't need anybody selling me anything on television. So between 20 and 22 and 13 and Turner Classic Movies, I never watch a commercial, ever.
That's very good.
And if there's nothing good on either one of them, I'm always on watching your channels.
Well, we appreciate that.
And I also like, you've added a new little thing that I like, which is that you tell us when the name of the show, what's coming on next, when that show will appear again.
I'm glad you've noticed that. We've had a number of complaints, largely because the cable box does not correctly report what is on our channel.
Yes.
If you've ever noticed that,
I've tried that.
I don't even want to know what it's saying your show is, but it's not saying what your show is. What it's actually reporting to you is what's on the air in Riverhead, which is an internal Cablevision issue. And I know the town board has spoken to Cablevision and tried to get them to work it out. And we sort of gave up about 2 years ago because we kept hitting walls over and over again. But what we wanted to do instead was come up with another method for people to determine what's on the air. So we have two things that we put into effect in the last 3 or 4 months. One is the interstitial updates that tell you in between programs what's on later tonight, and also try to tell you when the show that you're watching will be aired again, if it's scheduled to be aired again. And I should also clarify that it might tell you it's not scheduled to run again, which doesn't mean that it isn't running again. It just isn't running again in the near future. The second piece
That's
of that,
good, because Seal was telling me about some weeds, and I want to find that.
and you want to find out, exactly
indeed.
which ones are the bad ones, right? Or all weeds, bad weeds. The second piece of that is on our website at ltveh.org. We now have program guide data on the front of that, where you can actually go in advance and see up to 2 weeks of program data and know what's actually coming up. So those are two big changes that we put in to help facilitate it until Cablevision figures out how to get the programming information correct.
Now, getting back to the airport show, which we saw, which was just absolutely riveting, it's really amazing how many people from all over the East.
Came out
I
for
mean,
that,
that is really startling. This, regulation of getting it under our control, is going to be the issue of January. And I'm wondering, were any of the people in places like Southold and parts of Sag Harbor and Southampton able to see that show?
They were. We have a very good relationship with Cablevision. I understand that there's certain things Cablevision does really well and other things that they have challenges with, as does any company. But we have a wonderful contact at Cablevision who is a government affairs coordinator there, who helps us out to bring programming to other communities. Back in the day, we used to have something known as Interconnect, where 2 hours twice a week, our programming would automatically be carried to the other communities, and sort of as cable TV has evolved, that went away. But Cablevision actually helps us out in situations where the programming we have affects the larger community, because obviously we're on a peninsula and we're on the eastern end of Long Island, but we're a much larger community, that sort of Peconic County feeling that people have talked about many times before. And so Cablevision, at their own expense, will actually assign a technician who has a great deal of work. It's not just plugging in a couple cables. They have to write code, and somebody has to sit there and monitor it and make sure. And so a gentleman will actually sit in Riverhead, a great technician at Cablevision that we work very closely with, and for an interconnect like that, he will actually monitor our signal and make sure that it gets out to those other communities. Something that a lot of people don't realize about cable TV and the way it works is our signal doesn't just stay in East Hampton. When we transmit from our building, we go up to right behind One Stop on Springs Fireplace Road. That's where sort of the Cablevision headquarters for East Hampton Town is, where all the cables come from, is that one spot. But then our signal travels all the way to Riverhead, goes through a couple boxes, comes all the way back to East Hampton, and then goes out to the community. So Cablevision has the ability to monitor and adjust and refine the signal when it goes to Riverhead. So in the case of an airport meeting, it becomes easy for them to then distribute that out as needed throughout the community.
So I know that right after Sandy, you had a very special program here where there was music played. Everybody was really, again, jamming this place,
Yes.
you know, and it was really a wonderful event. And how do you choose events, and what is it that drives your events?
Well, so, you know, I always have the business hat on. And so part of that is ascertaining what are the costs to the organization to run an event. You know, how do we put on something without jeopardizing the building, pushing the staff too hard, you know, creating a slew of costs that then somehow we have to absorb within our budget. So there's always that piece of it. But the board usually looks at public events and concepts for public events and makes a determination as to what they think whether or not it falls in line with our mission, whether or not it adds value to the community, whether or not, even if it's for a nonprofit group, we always are looking to help out local 501c3 nonprofits. And so anytime we can, you know, create a strategic alliance or bring something to the community they otherwise couldn't have, it's usually a pretty easy sell.
So do you have a limit on how much you can do, or do you sort of have a free hand?
As an organization or as me?
Either way, whatever one
That's
you
a
want.
tricky host when they ask a question like that. You know, the thing is I am very fortunate in that the board has a lot of faith in my abilities and my decisions, and I do ask the board to weigh in and approve and talk about things. When you talk about something like the airport meeting, we always are here to help out the town in any way we can. They needed a home to do it. I knew that we could do it in a way that it could not be done anywhere else, and that was at that point, and it was also very fast moving. That meeting came up in a week or so, and so we said, we're doing that, absolutely. We have some initiatives we're rolling out this fall, a little top secret at the moment, but you'll hear something in the next week or two. And those have been initiatives that the board has been working on for some time to bring new programming, to bring events that'll happen in Studio 3 especially, that again will benefit the community at large.
And also, in case people don't know, that they can always, on Channel 22, see a lot of the boards that are, you know, not only in the village, but also in the town, that are really, you know, deciding our fate, you know, and how this town is going to fare in the future.
And one of the biggest things is school boards, which is sort of a new thing. The school boards have largely been tough to penetrate. I don't know why, you know, you never understand why one board is for taping when another's against it, or isn't as open to it, I should say. But we started taping East Hampton Town school board meetings about a year ago now, and the board, I think, was pleasantly surprised that that coverage, which increases the transparency of what they do and shows the community how hard they work and the tough decisions that they have to make as, you know, board members, has been hugely successful for them. And Sag Harbor has now followed suit, and we are airing Sag Harbor school board meetings to add to that collection. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this town. And
well, I hope you will include Springs pretty soon, because we are Springs residents, or have a very large district, and we would love to really be able to know what's going on and what decision. Many of us don't even know when the meetings are. I just found out when the next meeting is going to be, which I'm going to go to.
Okay.
But I also would, I can't leave this without talking about the trustees of East Hampton. I mean, there are many people who would love to know, as this governing body that does get money and is paid staff, we would like to know more about how they make their decisions and what they are deciding on, and what's before them. And there's been a big thing calling for them to allow them to be
taped, yes.
as well. How are you feeling about that?
I feel about the trustees as I feel about any board. I mean, we are here to tell the story of this town from a factual standpoint. You know, we don't boil it down. We show you exactly what happened.
Exactly.
The previous town board renegotiated our contract, our operating contract.
I remember.
And they were very smart when they wrote that up. And one of the things that they put in was that we have to cover trustee meetings when the trustees decide to be taped. So there's no cost to the trustees or to the taxpayers or to residents of the town to have them taped. Basically, it's up to me to figure out internally how to make it work, but that's something that's offered. I can tell you that if and when the trustees decide to be taped, if they're at Bluff Road, unfortunately, meetings can't be carried live. It's just a function of the technology and the way it's set up. But we're there to help serve our community, and if that means taping trustee meetings, we are there with bells on.
And the smallness of the building will make no difference as somebody who has a minor degree in media communications, and you're being able to.
You know, every space has its challenges. We've taped meetings. I don't know if you remember the old brown bag room at Town Hall and the previous Town Hall. I mean, it was a cubicle. It was tiny,
yes.
and we make it work. And really, it's our job to figure that out. Our job is the logistics and to get it going. All we need is the request by that board and the permission to do it.
Well, that's what we have to work for. And we will put our future of our television of 20 and 22 in your capable hands. And we'll hope that you have the vision to absolutely make it even more effective and a more viable community service.
Well, thank you, and we always appreciate the input of community members like yourselves and anybody who has thoughts about how we can make it better.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Phyllis.
Walking across the hall.
It's a big journey.